everyone. I'm Matthew Wilkinson, historian with Heritage Mississauga, and welcome to our Saturday matinee. We're going to be offering a series of presentations around the legends of Mississauga, or those that help to shape this place that we call home today. Some of the life and times of some of the giants in the history of our city. And we're going to take this presentation again. We're going to break it into a few parts. So over a few weeks, you'll see kind of the entirety of some of the biographies we've assembled here. We're taking it chronologically of sorts, really chronologically from the time in which the people we will talk about were born. Many of them weren't born here. In fact, they came to live in this place long before it came to be known as Mississauga. They came to live here, in some cases, in the later parts of their lives. But we'll examine kind of the life and times of Mississauga legends, or what I've referred to as the giants amongst us. And this again is part one of several. There's different ways in which we connect with kind of the people that have helped shape this community, and many of them are more modern in their scope, looking from kind of the city from the time it became a town in 1968, a city in 1974 to the present. Others look a little bit further back in time, and you can find a series of interpretive plaques at different locations around the city. You can visit Legends Row itself at the Mississauga Civic Center. Again, different ways in which our city has honored those that have meant so much to what it is to be living in the city, and the identity and the shape that the city has taken over the years. We also honor our sporting legends in connection with the Mississauga Sports Council. That they operate the Mississauga Sports Hall of Fame over near the Hershey Center, and different ways again in which people have impacted this community, and have in many different ways, different avenues of life, shaped the life and times of those that have come from Mississauga, inspiring people as well. There's also the Mississauga Walk of Fame, the music Walk of Fame that is down in Port Credit, and different ways again in which our community connects to some of the musical talents, the creative endeavors, and that realm of the identity that connects to the city of Mississauga. There's so many different ways in which we connect to and honor those that have made us proud over the years. And of course, at Heritage Mississauga, amongst many other organizations in the city, we look to honor those that contribute and make a significant impact on the cultural world of the city. And our annual awards gala, known as the Credits, giving credit where credit is due, of course, taking its name in association from the Credit River. But this is an annual award show where we honor the heritage heroes in Mississauga, and has become a mainstay on the event calendar in the cultural world here in Mississauga. And there's many resources that you can get through either public library, visiting the resource center at the Grange, different ways in which people over time have kind of helped to chronicle and make note of the extraordinary lives of people who have in some way connected with this place that we call home today. So to get into our presentation proper, and again, this is part one of several, we're going to be looking chronologically. So literally, we are going to step back in time and work our way forward closer to the present era as we go through, and looking at those that helped to shape this place. This first part of our presentation that you'll be seeing today really deals with some of those earliest individuals. And I don't offer this really as kind of the be-all and end-all of the who's who, if that makes sense, from historic Mississauga. There are so many people in a myriad of ways that have shaped this community and the identities therein, some of which falls on people like me, historians in the community, to try and make sure we do not lose them in the winds of time, if you will, and others, whether by design or by their own approaches to life, really left very little evidence of their passage. We don't want to take away from anyone who has impacted the community which they lived in a very positive way over time. When we look at the historical record when it relates to people, We are handicapped really right from the get-go, and we try to rectify that as we can with the records that are available to us. But history was largely male-oriented and Anglo-Saxon or white-oriented. So we have a scarcity of records sometimes as it pertains to uh, Indigenous people, people of color, or women within our history. But again, we continue to delve into that world to make sure that people perhaps that past historians did not record, make sure that we are able to, as best we can, gather those stories and make those connections as well. You never want to lose anyone as you pass through time and you look back at the story of the place in which you live. There's always a yin and a yang. There's always a push-pull factor. People do not live in a bubble then or now. News might have traveled historically. It might have traveled slower, but it still traveled, and people still traveled. And borders really don't. We're not static things. People continue to interact with other people and with the landscape throughout history. And so what we offer here is just kind of a glimpse into that world, the world in which some of these people lived and shaped, and then passed on to future generations or the following generations. Looking at these people are a little bit like looking at building blocks. They made a mark, they left a mark behind them, and the next generation built upon, in many cases, what they had started. And so when you peel back the layers of the onion, if you will, you peel back the layers of the picture of the city of Mississauga, you really start to kind of see some commonalities and some paths that emerge that lead forward in time through successive generations. It's a fascinating way to look at the story of our city through the personalities and the people who helped to shape it. But again, not a complete science, and it's something that we continually look to investigate and to broaden our perspective and our understanding of those that lived here. The first person on our list is a minister, an Anglican Reverend, James Magrath, who was born in Ireland. He came to Canada in the later stages of his career in 1827, and there are stories recorded of his passage from Ireland. He was not a poor parish priest. He came with a significant amount of personal material, multiple boatloads or bateaux of material that was shipped over the St. Lawrence into Lake Ontario and eventually into Toronto. He was under the impression through his letters with Bishop John Strawn in Toronto or York at the time that he would become the Reverend at St. James Cathedral in Toronto. You might imagine his chagrin upon arrival in this fledgling colony in the wilderness of Upper Canada when he arrives at York and essentially is handed his walking papers and told that he is no longer going to be the Reverend at St. James Cathedral, but rather he will establish a small parish congregation out in the wilderness of historic Mississauga, or the wilds of Toronto Township. The story is passed on. He was less than impressed with his new assignment, but being the stout and devout clergyman, when his superior asked him to do this task, he took it on with a great fervor. And he's citing the location for a church that had already been built the year before, and sending his sons out in advance to build a dwelling for himself, which he would come to call Arundel, Ireland in the Valley, or Erin in the Dale, which is where the name of the community would later take its name from, was the estate of Reverend James Magrath. His estate was on 400 acres in what is now the Credit Woodlands area north of Dundas Street. And the church that was found, the church that he helped to build, although the structure was already there, St. Peter's Anglican Church in Arundel. That's at the intersection of Dundas Street and Mississauga Road. He did send his sons, all became prominent members within the community. There wasn't a lot of kind of political advancement for them. None of the sons went into the clergy, unlike their father, but they did become prominent citizens in the area. One was a local militia captain, another ran a hotel and general store and was postmaster. Another managed the large estate of the Reverend Arundel, and was quite a successful farmer. And so you have kind of this upper middle class family that really becomes the landed gentry in the Arundel community, and one of the most prominent families in the area, all on the shoulders really of Reverend James Magrath of St. Peter's. And if you go to St. Peter's today, at the foot of St. Peter's driveway, you'll find the Ontario Heritage Trust plaque that honors this very influential early minister within this community, and really had a sway over a large area for different Anglican congregations. Very prominent citizen, prominent minister, helped to establish multiple Anglican churches throughout historic Mississauga. Reverend James Magrath, a very influential and powerful individual very early on. A name from history that doesn't get the recognition that many of the others on our list will do, and that was Colonel Connell James Baldwin. He served in the Royal Navy during the British Napoleonic Wars, and rose to the rank of colonel, which was kind of an interesting avenue for him to achieve, because he was Irish and Catholic, and usually those advanced ranks within the military were not open to Catholics, and so somehow that door opened at least a crack for Connell James Baldwin. At the cessation of the Napoleonic Wars in the years that followed, the British economy was in a downturn, and a lot of the senior officers were being paid off to kind of remove their salary from the books, and he was relegated to half pay. And in compensation for his service, as a result of his rank, he was able to attain a land grant, and he received 800 acres of land in historic Mississauga, up near the Malton area, near where Pearson International Airport is today. And he moved to Canada in 1828, settling himself on a portion of this land grant that he had received, and became quite an influential local citizen, very specifically involved in the resettlement of Irish Catholics, himself, of course, an Irish Catholic. And on his property in Malton, it said that he established a school, a small hospital, a church, a lodge in which he lived, kind of a laird in the manor, if you will, and he called the property Cloanehi after his Irish birthplace. He was, during the rebellion of 1837, a dark moment in our Canadian history, he did support the Reform Party, but not the radical reforms of William Lyon Mackenzie, rather the Baldwin reformers. And so he found himself in a position where sympathizing with reformers, but loyally defending the crown against those that would usurp it. He at his own expense, he outfitted a local regiment of volunteers to kind of form a loyal militia to the crown in attempts to kind of safeguard and track down the would-be rebels. The challenge with that was, although he applied for compensation, he never actually received formal permission to do so, and so after the fact, looking for payment for the services rendered, he was unsuccessful in achieving any compensation, and as a result, he went into some significant debt. Part of his tireless efforts for the resettlement of Irish Catholics involved traveling to the fever sheds in Toronto, where incoming Irish Catholic settlers, many of whom were terribly sick, were found their ways into the fever sheds in Toronto, and believing that it was safer and healthier to be out in the fresh air of the country at Cloanehi, he would, by his own expense, gather up many of these sick parishioners or sick countrymen and bring them out to the country, and upon their kind of regaining their health, he would help to set them up nearby. Out of Cloanehi, the community of Elmbank gradually emerges in a slightly separate location, but direct links between Cloanehi and the Irish Catholic St. Kevin's Church, or the Church of Sacred Heart, or Fifth Line Catholic Church, depending on the name that you want to give it, and the community of Elmbank. Colonel Baldwin, unfortunately, coming home late one night from visiting the hospital and fever sheds in Toronto, his horse stumbled. He was thrown from his horse, an older man at this point. It was in the wintertime. He was thoroughly soaked to the bone, landing in puddles, and regaining his horse and stumbling home. He caught a chill, and the chill grew worse and developed into pneumonia, and then just like that, he is gone. One of the most influential, if forgotten, individuals within our community, said to personally assisted in settling hundreds of Irish Catholic settlers, and just a remarkable individual, and again, gone too early in his story. From there, we go to General Peter Adamson, or to give his correct rank, Reverend Major General Sir Peter Adamson. Now, how's that for a handle? Brevet Major General means that he basically received a battlefield promotion to Major General. He was receiving the rank of he receiving the pay for the rank of a colonel, and then received a promotion, the brevet with the title without the rank without the pay. He was born in Scotland, the eldest of three sons to James Adam. There was Peter Adamson, Joseph Adamson, and James Adamson, and much like kind of upper middle class families at the time, Peter went into the military, Joseph went into medicine, and James went into the clergy. But it was Peter that really kind of shone the brightest of the bunch, the eldest son. During the Napoleonic Wars, he served with great distinction in Portugal against the Napoleonic armies, and he was in command of what was known as the Hunters Battalion. If anyone is a fan of the Sharp series, which follow a character by the name of Richard Sharp, played by Sean Bean, and through the Napoleonic Wars, and you look at the kind of the green-coated rifles that are there within, it depicts largely that connection to a unit known as the Hunters Battalion, or inspired by the Hunters Battalion. And this was, at the time, Colonel Peter Adamson's own unit. Fought in a number of battles, and if you are interested in seeing one of the kind of the neat parts of history, we have a Napoleonic general buried in Mississauga with his coat of arms, his knighthood, and the battles he served in. And how's that for a little bit neat part of history? If you go to St. Peter's Anglican Cemetery at Arundel at Dundas Street and Mississauga Road, you will find in that cemetery the impressive gravestone for Brevet Major General Sir Peter Adamson, one of only 8 individuals during the Napoleonic Wars to receive the designation of Knight of the Tower and Sword, hence calling him Sir, for his gallant service, particularly during the Battle of Salamanca, where he was wounded. As a result of kind of the cessation of the war and the need to kind of level the books, if you will, the economy was suffering at the time. Many of the officers were offered half pay, or they could sell their commissions and go into essentially retirement. They would receive land in lieu of pay. And for General Peter Adamson, that land was in Canada, specifically here in historic Mississauga. He received 800 acres here in historic Mississauga. The old adage is the bigger the hat, or the higher the rank, the more land you got. This is an individual who was the highest ranking individual to ever settle within historic Mississauga, but also one of the highest in the entire province. We probably all recognize the name Isaac Brock from history, the ill-fated hero of the early stages of the War of 1812. He was a major general, and so you kind of get the idea that there are not too many of this rank, or the size of a hat, if you will, that came to settle in Canada. General Peter Adamson is believed to have received in excess of 20,000 acres of land scattered throughout the province. Ultimately, he brought in an officer under his command to settle with him in Canada to manage his lands. His name was first Arthur Jones, who married his only daughter, Isabella. On Arthur's death, she remarried Colonel Charles Mitchell, also an officer under the command of General Peter Adamson. he again came to Canada between first in 1819 actually, and selected a place in which he would live, which was here in historic Mississauga. In his absence, he had a house built for him, and upon his return into Canada in 1821, he settled in that house nearby Arundel. On the south side of Dundas between Fifth Line West and Winston Churchill. That was his acreage. And the name of his house was Thorn Lodge, which is where Thorn Lodge Drive gets its name from. And you can also find in the village of Arundel, Adamson Street, which a village he helped found, the congregation which he founded, St. Peter's Anglican Church, an individual who was involved in politics and business and churches and military matters. He had a parade square at his property for the militia to drill. He received the honorary rank of colonel of the militia. He was a speaker of the legislative council. Was always the honorable Sir Peter Adamson as well. It was his influence that convinced Bishop John Strawn to send the next senior clergyman that arrived in Canada over to Springfield, what was then Springfield, later Arundel. And that, of course, is the fellow we've already met, Reverend James Magrath. So you have all these kind of places intersecting in this one individual, in General Peter Adamson. Again, perhaps one of the most influential citizens during his era. Just an incredible story. And there you can see General Adamson towards the end of his life, splendidly physiqued like a soldier would stand, with his shoulders back and kind of square approach to the camera at the time, and displaying his medals, including the middle one is the Knight of the Tower and Sword. And so we have kind of this splendid remembrance of and honor of the career of General Peter Adamson. Another kind of spectrum from those higher ranking ones to kind of a more calmly story is that which we consider to be kind of the first of the settlement era stories in historic Mississauga, and that is the arrival of Joseph and Jane Silverthorne. They arrived in historic Mississauga, setting up a homestead for themselves near the intersection of what is Cawthra Road and Dundas Street. They arrived in 1807 and really became kind of the cornerstone of the community that would develop around them. They first lived in a log cabin adjacent to an inn. They were on the north side. The inn was on what was known as Cat Cody's Tavern, was on the south side, just by Cawthra Road. After a few years in the log cabin and the family starts to grow, they built a new home for themselves, built in 1817, known as Cherry Hill. And a portion of that house is the oldest surviving building in Peel County, which is quite an amazing thing to consider how big our city has grown, to have this really connection to our early history still within our city today. They had 12 children, Joseph and Jane. Joseph served during the War of 1812 with the embodied militia. He was principally involved with things like road maintenance and transport, so the transport of supplies. But being a father with, at the time, an expecting wife and a number of aged children, or a number of young children, Joseph was unable to commit to a lot of service during the War of 1812. Unlike his brother Aaron, who lived nearby in Etobicoke, who served a great deal and rose to a considerable rank. But the Silverthorne family is well documented. Really, we hear those those colonial terms of pioneer, not really in the terms of what pioneer historically is meant, but they were our pioneer family. When you think of things like stories of Little House on the Prairie and those early kind of vestiges of settlement before the city came to be, there's lots of different people that come through the place it is, Mississauga, but they're our first, and they're better documented than many of the early families within our community. And you can read, there's a book by a local author, Kathleen Hicks, called Life and Times of the Silverthornes of Cherry Hill. So you're able to read more on this remarkable story of Joseph and Jane Silverthorne and their house, Cherry Hill. From there we go to William Thompson. If you're in Arundel Village, you'll find Thompson Street, which is named for William Thompson. He was the first elected individual that we would consider equivalent to a mayor of a community. He served as reeve of Toronto Township in 1851, the very first individual to be elected thus. He was of Loyalist stock, born in New Brunswick, settled in Clarkson in 1808, along with his father, and received a considerable amount of land as a Loyalist. During the War of 1812, when hostilities broke out in June of 1812, William was gazetted or created a captain within the local militia. As his career evolved, the war is over. The militia reformed several times, many times under the direct command of William Thompson. He does rise to the rank of colonel, and if you visit his gravestone at St. Jude's Anglican Cemetery in Oakville, you'll find the notation of Colonel William Thompson. He did serve a time. He was captured by the enemy during the war, towards the end of the war of 1812, and he spent some time in kind of a gentleman's jail in Plattsburgh, if you will. By that I mean that he had a chance to go about the town as long as he promised to be in good behavior and report back to the barracks in the evening, which he did. And it was remarked of him by William Merritt, that William Thompson was a man of most exemplary morals, a mild, good temper, and possessed of more fortitude than generally falls the lot of mankind. Now, how's that for a complimentary quote? You can't get much finer than that. A couple of his sons ended up going up to Midland and Penetanguishene, later serving as mayor of Penetanguishene. And so you have kind of these neat connections within this community, and there are descendants of William Thompson surviving today, many of whom live in kind of the Midland Penetanguishene area today for obvious reasons. But their patriarch, they're kind of the first step within founding the family identity, was here in historic Mississauga, right on the border of historic Oakville. From there we go to Sir John Beverly Robinson. Many of you may have heard of the term historically the family compact, and I won't go into great detail with the compact, but they're principally involved during the tumultuous years leading up to and including the rebellion of 1837. They were kind of the wealthy elite that controlled the public offices of the land, if you will, kind of those key offices that people might aspire to, but there was no way in which they would be brought into those positions. This collection of individuals, many of whom were intermarried and then supported each other financially and otherwise, it became collectively known as the Family Compact. John Beverly Robinson's biography is referred to as bone and sinew of the Family Compact. So if there was this body of individuals that were connected socially and economically and politically that created this unit referred to as the Family Compact, Sir John was considered to be the linchpin and the key component of that. Quite a powerful statement. He served during the War of 1812 with the 3rd York Militia, and after the death of Colonel John McConnell and the unfortunate incarceration of another individual within the Attorney General's office overseas at the time, Sir John Beverly Robinson is appointed acting Attorney General at the age of 21. Absolutely remarkable story. Recommended by his supervisors, of course, but nonetheless, he ably performed his job at the tender age of 21, Attorney General before he was even called to the bar. Following the return of the actual Attorney General, he does go back to school. He's appointed Solicitor General for Upper Canada, Chancellor for Trinity College, first Chief Justice of Canada West. You talk about kind of a mover and shaker within his community. He wrote the first legal code in Canada. He's the founder of the Law Society of Upper Canada. If you have a chance to visit Osgoode Hall in Toronto, and you'll find a giant marble statue right inside the front entrance to Sir John Beverly Robinson. Just a remarkable individual that we continue to study in many ways. He believed, to put kind of a simple spin on it, he believed in the fullest application of the law, regardless of who had committed. If you committed offense, didn't matter what walk of life you were from, you were guilty, and you would be if you were guilty, you would be punished to the fullest extent the law permitted, including banishings and executions where considered appropriate or deemed appropriate. So an individual who saw the world in very black and white terms, a very powerful individual, and it was said, "Do not cross Sir John Beverly Robinson because he will." He tries to keep things in very strong order. Incidentally, he built the offices of Heritage Mississauga, known as the Grange, in 1828, when he was during which time he was an executor of Indian land sales in the Credit River Valley. And so you can visit things like the Grange today, really walk in the footsteps of the past, or take a gander at Sir John's Homestead, the local side street, which takes its name from Sir John Beverly Robinson, and the fact that his homestead, if you will, the Grange, really what amounted to a summer office, summer cottage for himself, but it was built on a 50-acre plot of land within the Credit River Valley, and that again known today as the Grange, home of Heritage Mississauga. From there, we go to Helen Beatty, and I always get a smile and a chuckle for Helen Beatty. A time when women did not engage in industry, Helen Beatty was a trendsetter, or at least someone who shirked those traditional roles, if you will. Following her husband John Beatty established a significant milling operation in the south end of Streetsville, and following John's death in 1842, Hetty took over the operation of the family grist and flour mill, and continued running that for a number of years. She was known to be kind of impulsive and very quick to kind of make a judgment and make a decision, most often good, strong decisions. She was known locally as Hetty and seen to be a formidable and dominant businesswoman at a time, again, when it was so rare for women to be involved in industrial, commercial, or economic enterprises. Really a pioneer for women within the community and known widely at the time. She was active in St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church, and it's just a remarkable story of a time when women traditionally did not enter those fields of business and commerce. And not only did Hetty do that, but she was seen as being very formidable and dominant, and very much went in with a strong work ethic and a focus within her daily tasks. Warren Clarkson, after whom Clarkson is named, was American-born in Albany, New York. He arrived in Upper Canada in 1809, first settling a little bit north of Toronto, and where he served with a local regiment there during the War of 1812. And it was Thomas Marigold, a nearby neighbor, that convinced Clarkson to come to the Marigold's Point area, what would later become Clarkson, and establish himself. And property was purchased and a house was built in 1819. Warren was very much involved in every community aspect of his. At the time he was living in this community. He was a trustee for the local cemetery known today as Spring Creek Cemetery. He was a trustee of that cemetery for over 50 years, which is where he's buried there as well. He also ran the first general store and post office in 1835, and the community was ultimately named after him in 1855 when the Great Western Railway came through and established a train station known as Clarkson's. And if you go to Spring Creek Cemetery today, you can find the large stone angel not far from Clarkson Road, and that is marking the grave of Warren Clarkson. From there, we go to Jacob Cook. Many of you might connect with that surname, much like Clarkson. Cooksville is named after an individual right at the intersection of Hurontario Street at Dundas. Jacob Cook, also American-born in Pennsylvania. His family settled near Ancaster. And Jacob used to tend property for his father along the western shore of Mississauga. And so you had these two property ownership periods where you actually had sorry, I lost my train of thought. You had these period in time in which Jacob Cook was managing land for his father here in historic Mississauga, while still his father maintaining land in Ancaster, and he would walk. Jacob would walk between those distances. He met an individual said to be of the name of David Shannon in 1819. It was Shannon that convinced him to purchase land in historic Mississauga, namely purchase Shannon's own land. And that was the case. Jacob arrived, realized that this This property was of perhaps tremendous future value in terms of opportunity and location. And he applied for what seems very humble today, a mail contract in 1820. At his height of operations, 1860s and 1870s, Jacob controlled nearly every mail contract service between Kingston and Goderich. If you think about that, when things are relegated to horse and buggy travel, and mail traveled quite often on stagecoaches along with passengers, and could be hard pressed to keep a short distance. Nonetheless, this community was quite remarkable, and just a fascinating way to look at kind of building an empire. Jacob Cook was not someone who dreamed of being a farmer. He had loftier ambitions, if you will. He developed a stagecoach, a general store, a hotel, and ultimately the community of Cooksville was named after him and when the post office opened in 1836. And from there, we'll end on Diedemia and George Woodford Ross and their property known as Cedar Park Farm. George Woodford Ross, born in 1796 in Virginia, was an emancipated former slave. And he was granted his emancipation and ultimately came to Canada, where he met and married Diedemia Paul in 1834. Diedemia with connections to the Wilberforce settlement of London, Ontario. George and Diedemia married in 1834 and bought a farm in historic Mississauga in 1836. Their farm was on the north side of Burnhamthorpe Road near Cothra Road, and they called it Cedar Park Farm, incidentally after the name of the plantation that their slave owner and father had operated. They had 11 children within the family, and the farm remained in the family for several generations, not departing the Ross family well into the 1960s. The property continues to be connected in some fashion. So you have this another kind of forgotten story of, and there are no pictures of them. This is a part of our challenge as well. These are artist renditions of George Woodford Ross and his wife Diedemia. Diedemia was a former school teacher from Wilberforce, and both communities predominantly black, and really struggling kind of for a voice and entity that will kind of help share and spread their story and the remarkable story that was Cedar Park Farm within our community. That is the end of our first part of our presentation, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope in the weeks to come you'll join us for part 2, and as we travel down memory lane and explore some of the life and times of significant individuals who helped shape the story and the identity of this thing called Mississauga. So thank you, be well, and we'll see you down the road.